My sister borrowed my 15-year-old daughter's brand new car without permission. She totaled it, then had the audacity to call the police and blame my child. Our parents backed her lie again. I just stayed quiet and made one move. 3 days later, their smiles vanished when The car wasn't just a car. It was the one thing my daughter had been counting down to for nearly a year. A silver-blue 2022 Civic, barely used, flawless inside and out. I'd saved for it in secret and planned the surprise for her 16th birthday. She didn't know it was hers yet. I parked it in the garage, covered it with a tarp and told her not to snoop. It was meant to be revealed next weekend at her birthday dinner. That night started off quiet. A little too quiet. Around 2:30 a.m. I woke up to a noise that didn't belong. A loud scraping followed by a heavy thud outside. Not like a trash can fell. More like metal dragging. I got up thinking maybe an animal knocked something over in the driveway. I didn't even make it to the front window before headlights shot through the living room blinds. The kind of lights you only see when someone's pulling in fast and crooked. I looked out and just stood there. The Civic, my daughter's car, was in the driveway. The front bumper looked warped, half-hanging. One of the headlights was cracked. The hood was slightly popped, smoke curling out. Thought I was dreaming. Then the driver's door opened. My sister got out. Not my daughter. My sister. She stumbled toward the porch like it was no big deal. Like she hadn't just wrecked a car that didn't belong to her, one she had no business even knowing about. I opened the front door before she could knock. She actually smiled and asked if I could help her with something. Her words, not mine. She said the car was acting weird. Said she just borrowed it to visit a friend and didn't want to wake me. She called it a favor, since she didn't take her own beat-up sedan because of a broken taillight. I was so stunned I couldn't even speak at first. She tossed the keys in my hand like she hadn't just hijacked a 16-year-old's birthday present. And then she added, like it was an afterthought, that the damage wasn't that bad. My daughter must have heard the commotion because she came downstairs in her pajama pants and froze when she saw the car. That's when the screaming started. She kept asking what happened, if someone stole it, if it was real. I told her to stay back, but she was already in tears. I grabbed my phone and called the cops. Not because I wanted drama, because I needed it on record. My sister was pacing around like she was waiting for something. Turns out she was. As the blue and red lights lit up the block, my sister suddenly changed. She told me not to overreact. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. I have people who saw your daughter take it earlier. Don't try to put this on me. I thought she was joking. But when the officers asked what was going on, she repeated the lie. Said she found the car abandoned, brought it back as a courtesy, and saw my daughter sneaking back inside. I was floored. Even the cops were confused. And just as I started to speak, headlights showed up again. My parents pulled in. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't look at the car. My dad marched up and told the officers he could confirm everything my sister just said, that my daughter had taken the car earlier without permission and my sister went out looking for it to help. My mom chimed in, adding that they'd been trying to guide me for years, and now it was clear I'd lost control of my household. I didn't say a word. I stood there in silence, watching them cover for my sister like it was routine. Like this wasn't a felony. Like my daughter's reputation and safety didn't matter. But I'd already made a decision in my head. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't fight. I would wait. And 3 days later, their smiles would vanish for good. Nobody got arrested that night. The police said there wasn't enough to go on. Just a bunch of conflicting stories and a damaged car. They took notes, asked a few basic questions, then gave us all one of those polite but tired looks and left. My sister stayed on the porch, arms crossed like she'd done me a favor. My parents walked around like they'd just solved a neighborhood crisis. My daughter didn't say a word the whole time. She just stood in the hallway, staring at the wrecked front of what was supposed to be her birthday surprise. I walked inside without a word, locked the door, went to the kitchen and sat at the table with the lights off. I didn't sleep. I didn't talk. I didn't even go out to move the car. It stayed parked in the driveway like a crime scene. Every time I looked at it through the window, I felt that deep, slow burn behind my eyes. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold sense of clarity. The next morning, I ignored every call and text. My mom left 3 voicemails, each one more condescending than the last. First it was, "We need to talk," then, "You're being dramatic," and finally, "Don't forget who's always been there for you." I deleted them all without listening twice. My dad sent a single message, "Call us when you're ready to be reasonable." My sister went quiet, except for the part where she posted a selfie with a cheesy quote about how the truth always comes out and liars eventually choke on their own poison. I took a screenshot, but none of that mattered. Because while they were still celebrating whatever twisted version of events they believed in, I made a plan. That afternoon I drove out to see Grandma. She's not the tea and cookies type. She's sharper than most people half her age and doesn't waste words. Her house is out by the lake, quiet and clean like nothing bad ever happens there. I brought my daughter with me. We sat in her sunroom and told her everything. The car was supposed to be a surprise. My daughter had no idea it was hers until that night. I told her how my sister somehow found the spare key I'd hidden, took it without asking, drove it God knows where, crashed it, then tried to dump it back on us while spinning a whole story that blamed a child. I told her how my parents arrived like they'd been prepped and immediately backed the lie. Didn't even ask what happened, just walked in like lawyers rehearsing their lines. I didn't ask Grandma to take sides. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just laid it all out and let the silence fill the room. Grandma stared out the window for a long time. Then she asked me one question. How much did the car cost? I told her the exact number, down to the last cent. She nodded, stood up, walked to the kitchen and made a call on her landline. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard enough. If they think they can lie to the police and still live under my roof, they're about to learn something new. After that she said nothing more about it. She hugged my daughter, handed her a cookie she hadn't taken out in years and told us to drive home safe. That was it. No details, no promises. But I knew something was about to shift. I didn't expect what came next. 3 days passed. On the morning of the 3rd, my phone started buzzing non-stop. First my sister, all caps, full meltdown. What did you do? Then my mom. This is disgusting. You've crossed a line. And then finally my dad, who never texts more than a sentence. You'll regret this, Jane. Trust me. I didn't answer any of them. I just got in my car and drove to Grandma's house. When I turned the corner I knew. Boxes on the front lawn. My dad on the driveway shouting into his phone. My sister standing next to her car with makeup smeared across her face. My mom arguing with someone I didn't recognize. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a mover. The front door was wide open. Grandma wasn't even inside. She was on the back porch, sipping coffee and reading a book like it was just a regular morning. Turns out she hadn't warned them. She just handed them 3 days' notice backed with full legal paperwork, told them the house wasn't theirs, never was, and now their time was up. She didn't ask them to leave. She told them. No rent. No contracts. Just a gift they'd treated like a right. And now it was over. I didn't get out of the car right away. I sat there for a few minutes just watching. My dad was in the driveway barking into his phone, pacing like a man who just got handed a bill he couldn't pay. My sister was throwing things into the back seat of her car, pausing every few seconds to yell at my mom, who kept trying to open the locked front door like it would magically let her in if she turned the knob hard enough. The door wasn't going to open. Grandma had changed the locks that morning. Quietly. Without a word. She gave them exactly 3 days to leave, and they spent all 3 pretending it wasn't real. I guess they thought she'd back down or that I'd come crawling back and undo it all. Maybe they thought they could guilt her into letting them stay, the same way they guilt her into handing over the house in the first place. They were wrong. And now they were dragging boxes into the front yard, shouting about lawsuits and betrayal like it was all some big injustice. I didn't even feel satisfied watching it. Just done. Done with the twisted performances, the gaslighting, the fake apologies followed by more backstabbing. There was nothing left to feel for them. I didn't go over. I just drove past them slow enough to make sure they saw me, then turned the corner and went home. That afternoon my daughter and I made pancakes. We didn't talk about them. She put on music, danced around the kitchen a little, and I let her. For the first time in days our house felt normal. Safe. Like a place that belonged to us again. I figured it was over. But around 9 the next morning Grandma called. She wanted to talk. Alone. So I drove back to her house. The place was so quiet, you'd never guess there'd been chaos on the lawn the day before. The movers were gone, the windows were shut, the yard was clean. It was like nothing ever happened. Grandma was in the kitchen with a letter in her hand. She didn't say anything at first. She just slid it across the table toward me. It was a note from my parents, written in my mom's handwriting, but clearly dictated by both of them. 3 pages. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had really happened. Just a list of complaints and twisted memories. They said I'd turned Grandma against them. That I'd poisoned the family. That this whole situation was the result of emotional instability on my part. And that my daughter was already showing the same patterns. They called the car incident a misunderstanding. They said I was exaggerating the damage to make them look bad. Then they accused Grandma of being manipulated by me and suggested that if she didn't reverse her decision, they might have to talk to a lawyer. They ended it with this line. We have sacrificed more for this family than anyone else. It's disgusting to be treated like strangers in our own home. Grandma didn't look angry. She looked tired. She told me she hadn't planned to take sides. She really hadn't. But something had changed her mind. Something she overheard. The night before, after they realized she wasn't bluffing, my mom had a full-blown meltdown in the kitchen. She didn't know Grandma was still awake, listening from the back hall. She started ranting. Not just about me, about her. About how she was bitter, controlling, always had been. About how she never truly helped the family, just held things over their heads. About how the house should have been theirs by now, and the only reason it wasn't was because Grandma was too selfish to die. That's exactly what she said. Then my sister jumped in. Said Grandma was letting her perfect little Jane run her life. That she always loved me more, always would, and now she was burning the whole family down just to make a point. That was the final nail. Grandma looked at me across the table and said she wasn't just done with them, she was finished. No more house. No more money. No more calls. She was taking back everything she'd given and making sure they didn't benefit from a single thing when she was gone. And then she said something I wasn't expecting. I stayed quiet for too long. I saw who they were years ago. But I always hoped maybe it would change. Now I know it won't. You don't reward poison just because it shares your last name. By that afternoon it was official. The locks were changed. Their names were taken off anything they'd once been attached to. Grandma even had her lawyer draw up new documents to make sure they couldn't try to fight her when the time came. The house was quiet again. But for the first time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. And that peace, it was going to cost them more than any car ever could. I thought that would be it. That they'd slink off to whatever rental they could find, lick their wounds in private and eventually move on. But that's not how my family works. They don't leave quietly, they double down. 2 days after the move out, I got a call from my daughter while I was at work. Her voice was shaky. She said someone had just come to the house and taped a white envelope to the front door. She didn't open it. I told her to stay inside and wait for me. When I got home, the envelope was still there. No name, no stamp, just stuck to the glass with packing tape. I opened it in the driveway. Inside were 4 photos. Printed on cheap paper, a little grainy. One was of my daughter and me at the grocery store. Another was her walking out of school. The third was our house from across the street. And the last one was me. Taken from behind. At work. No message, no threat. Just the photos. I stood there for a few seconds, then walked inside and locked every door. That night, I installed new cameras around the house. The next morning, I drove straight to Grandma's. I didn't even knock. I just walked in and handed her the envelope. She didn't react at first. Just stared at the photos. Then she walked into the hallway, opened her safe, the one nobody ever touches, and pulled out a thick folder with legal paperwork already prepared. Not just for the house. For everything. Her bank accounts. Her will. The titles to her vehicles. The land behind her property that my dad had always assumed would eventually come to him. She handed the folder to me. I asked what she was doing. She said she'd already called her lawyer. Everything in the folder had been transferred. To me. She said word for word, they've made it clear what they're capable of. I'm making it clear who I trust. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting it. I hadn't asked for it. But what really shocked me came next. Apparently, the night after she kicked them out, my sister didn't just rant about her. She went into Grandma's bedroom while she was asleep and tried to access her phone. Grandma woke up before she could get in but didn't say anything at the time. She didn't want a scene. But she remembered. She remembered everything. And she said this wasn't the first time. That a few months ago, some money had gone missing from one of her smaller accounts. She'd let it go, chalked it up to forgetfulness. But now she was thinking twice. She was angry, in that silent, deep kind of way that you only see in people who've been betrayed by someone they raised. Later that week, I got another call. Not from my sister or parents, but from their old neighbor. The one who lived across the street from Grandma's house. He said my mom had come back the night before and parked across from the house. Just sat there. For 2 hours. No lights on. No one got out of the car. Just watched the house. I didn't tell Grandma. Not right away. I knew it would just break her heart further. Instead, I drove out there that night myself and waited in the dark, parked behind the bushes on the edge of the property. I sat for nearly 4 hours. And sure enough, a car rolled up around 1:30 a.m. It was my mom. She didn't get out. She just sat there in the driver's seat looking at the house. Her hands on the steering wheel. Staring. I didn't approach her. I just snapped a picture of the car license plate and all, then drove away. The next morning I gave the photo to Grandma. She looked at it, then looked at me and said, well, now it's not just about boundaries. It's about safety. The locks changed again. A new alarm system. And a final decision. She wasn't waiting for them to come around anymore. She was cutting the cord, permanently. I didn't think they'd actually come back. After everything, the lies, the eviction, the letter under the door, the photos taped to my house, I assumed they were done trying to get their way. I was wrong. They showed up 3 days later like they had a right to. All 3 of them. My mom in full Sunday church clothes as if dressing nicely made her look more rational. My dad in his usual worn polo trying to appear calm and collected. And my sister, dragging a cardboard box like it contained a secret weapon. She looked confident. Too confident. They didn't knock. They just stood on the porch like they'd never left, waiting for someone to open the door. Grandma didn't move. She was sitting in the back room sipping coffee reading the paper. She looked at me once and said quietly, "If they're here to fix things, they can start by respecting who owns this house." I opened the door and stepped outside. I didn't let them in. My mom smiled at first like we were going to pretend nothing happened. She launched into this long, slow speech about how family can survive anything, how hearts get broken when people let outsiders influence them, and how there's still time to make this right. She used every trick in her playbook. Guilt, fake warmth, a little passive aggression, all sprinkled with just enough religious guilt to try and make me feel like the sinner in the room. I didn't say anything. I didn't even nod. Then my sister shoved the box toward me. She said it had proof, that I didn't know the full story, that I was only seeing what Grandma wanted me to see. I asked what kind of proof. She said, "Stuff that'll change how you see everything." I told her if that was the case she could leave it by the mailbox and drive away. She scoffed and called me brainwashed. That's when my dad finally spoke. And I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. He said, "This house doesn't belong to her. It was supposed to be passed down. She's not thinking clearly anymore. He's being manipulated. And if you don't fix this, Jane, you're no better." He said it slowly. Like he believed it. Like I'd stolen something. I turned, walked to the front door and knocked once. Grandma opened it immediately like she was already standing behind it. I looked at her and said, "They think this house doesn't belong to you." She stepped outside, didn't say a word for a full 5 seconds, then calmly looked at each of them and said, "You've got 5 minutes to leave. After that, I call the police." My mom started laughing. Actually laughing like Grandma had lost her mind. My sister opened the box right there and pulled out some dusty envelope, waving it in the air. She started shouting that she found old documents, letters from Grandpa that proved his real intentions. She claimed they were promised this house decades ago. Said it had been discussed at a family dinner, that there were witnesses, that the only reason Grandma had never made it official was because she wanted to keep them under her thumb. That's when Grandma looked at me and said, "Call." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. And that's when everything broke. My mom exploded. Not just yelling, raging. She started screaming about betrayal, how we'd poisoned the family, how my daughter was doomed to become just like me, how Grandma was a spiteful, cold woman who never cared about anyone but herself. She brought up things from 20 years ago. Claimed Grandma manipulated my grandfather into leaving her nothing in the will. Claimed I'd been her favorite pet since childhood. That none of this was about the car. It was about control. Then she looked right at me and said, "You think she loves you? Wait until she dies and you realize what you've really inherited." That part stuck with me. But not in the way she wanted. My sister finally realized the cops were probably on their way and started pulling at my mom's arm. My dad still didn't say a word. He just looked down, grabbed the box and followed them to the car. They drove off. Slowly. Like they expected someone to chase them. No one did. After they were gone, Grandma looked at the envelope my sister dropped. It was some old card from a birthday party in the 90s, signed by Grandpa, saying he was glad they had a roof over their heads. That was it. No will. No transfer. No secret plan. Just a recycled memory they twisted into entitlement. That night, Grandma made 3 phone calls, her lawyer, her bank, and her doctor. She updated everything. Finalized everything. Even added a medical directive I didn't know she had. She handed me a folder and said, "If anything happens to me, no one else gets near this house." And then she said, "This was never about the car." That just showed me how far they were willing to go. And now they're gone. The locks were changed again. The cameras were upgraded. The house went still. And for the first time since the night of the crash, I felt like the door had actually slammed shut. It's been just over 5 weeks. Long enough for the noise to die down. Long enough to see who meant what they said and who only spoke when they thought they still had control. No one came back. Not physically anyway. The box my sister dropped is still in Grandma's garage. It sits on a shelf next to a set of rusted tools no one's touched in a decade. She never opened it again. I didn't either. Whatever they thought was in there, proof, guilt, leverage, doesn't matter anymore. They didn't come to fix anything. They came to win. And when they realized they'd already lost, they threw one last tantrum and left a box of junk behind like a time capsule for no one. A week after they left, my sister sent a carefully written email. It read like it had been rewritten 10 times. She said things like, "Family needs time to heal, and no one's perfect." She said she missed the old days, said Grandma was being misled, and that she still loved us both. She didn't apologize. Not once. The car was mentioned in passing. A regrettable misunderstanding. My mom didn't even try to play nice. She sent one text. You made your choice. That was it. She wasn't wrong. I did make my choice. I made it the moment I stood on the porch between them and Grandma's front door. I made it again when I picked up the phone to call the police. And again when I decided to stay silent while they unraveled themselves in front of the entire neighborhood. And every day since I've made the same choice again. Peace. Grandma's house is quiet now, the good kind of quiet. She's back to reading in the mornings and taking her walks in the afternoon. The air feels lighter. She sleeps better. She cooks again. Not because she has to, but because she wants to. The holidays are going to be different. She's already said she's not hosting anymore. No more smiling at people who bite her hand under the table. No more dinners where everyone pretends nothing is wrong. She said she'll cook for me and my daughter and anyone else who's not there to perform. And that's the thing. It wasn't just about the car. Or the lie. Or the screaming. It was about a performance. One they'd been giving for years and we'd been pretending to believe. My daughter gets it now. He saw it all. She saw her aunt crash the car, lie to the police, try to destroy her. She saw her grandparents back it up without blinking. That kind of lesson sticks with you. We haven't replaced the car yet. We probably won't for a while. Insurance only covered a small portion. They found out it hadn't even been legally transferred to her name yet, so there was a mess of paperwork and technicalities. I've been rebuilding savings slowly. No GoFundMe. No family offers to help. Just quiet work and planning. But when I told my daughter we'd have to wait a few more months, she nodded and said, "We don't need it right now. We're okay." And we are. Better than okay. The strange part is how little I miss them. I used to think cutting off family was something you did only when things were unfixable. That you had to exhaust every option, that guilt was part of love. But that's not true. Love without boundaries is just control wearing a cheap mask. They told everyone I was ungrateful. That I was bitter. That I'd poisoned the family. But the family they're talking about, that wasn't a family. It was a system. And when someone refuses to keep playing their part in a broken system, the system falls apart. That's not destruction. That's freedom. Now no one lives in Grandma's house but her. No one sneaks in. No one shows up uninvited. No one shouts down the hallway at midnight or goes through her mail or whispers things behind closed doors. The house is finally what it should have been all along. Safe. So. And ours.